Uh-oh. All right. We are live, or alive, as the case may be. Okay, so let's go back and start. Okay, everybody, here we are. Let's see, what are we going to chant tonight? I think we will chant something spiritual. I think I need to put the capo on for this. Let's try this. Okay, I think it'll work. Shri Krishna Caitanya Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jai Go, Hari Bo, Hari Bo, Hari Bo, Jai Go, Hari Bo, Hari Bo, Hari Bo, Hari Bo, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Om Vishnupad, Paramahamsa Paravatakacharya, also Tada Satashi Shimad, His Divine Grace. Abhaya Chananada Bhaktivedanta Goswami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON Founder Acharya, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Nandakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Friends, say, oh, Sri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Sidway to Gadadha, Sivasati Gaur, Bhakta, Vrinda Ki Jai. Sri Sri Radhakrishna Gopakamnath, Sayam Kunda, Radhakunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai, Vrindavanam Ki Jai, Maturadam Ki Jai, Jagannath Swami Ki Jai, Yamunamai Ki Jai, Gangamai Ki Jai, Srimati Tulasi Devi Ki Jai, Samaveda Bhakta, Vrinda Ki Jai, Gaur Premananda, Hari Hari Bol. All glory is the assembled devotees, all glory is the assembled devotees, all glory is the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Namo Vishnu Padaya, Krishna Prasnaya Bhutale, Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namani Namaste, Saraswati Devi, Gaurupani Pacharane Nivashesha, Shunyavadi Paschatya, Deja Tarane. So good to see everybody. I'll have a little request at the end of the class, but let's start with our reading of the Caitanya Caritamrta. We're on the 24th chapter of the Sri Caitanya Caritamrta Madhya Lila, talking about Lord Chaitanya's explanation of the Atmarama verse. And he's explaining this to Sanatana Goswami. So, Om Gana Timirandasha Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshuram Meditam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I offer my respectful obeisances under the lotus feet of my spiritual master, His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, who so kindly opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge while I was blinded in the darkness of ignorance. Okay. For those who are not blind in the darkness of ignorance, it doesn't apply to you. But for the rest of us, it applies to us. Okay, so we will continue. Jaya Jaya Sri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Jaya Sri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Jaya Sri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Okay, we're starting with text 184 in the 24th chapter of the Madhya Lila of the Sri Caitanya Caritamrta. Rishi Keshe Rishi Kani Ashastayar Gatani He Sa Eva Daryam Apnoti Samsara Jiva Chanchale. In this material world, all living entities are disturbed due to their flickering position. A devotee, however, is fixed in the service of the lotus feet of the Lord, the master of the senses. Such a person is considered situated in endurance and patience. So these are, of course, the qualities that are also mentioned by Srila Rupa Goswami in the Upadeshamrita. He mentions the positive qualities. Utsaham, Nischaya, Dharya, Tat Karma, Pavartana, enthusiasm and patience. Patience means that you're enduring too. This is actually very, very important because sometimes there'll be so many tests, so many traumatic experiences in life. Life is made of traumatic experiences. Unfortunately, that's the way life is. You know, people you love will turn against you. So many things. Hey, you'll have aches and pains in the body. You may be rich one day, poor the next day. You know, it's like a roller coaster, this material world. So traumatic experiences occur when we have unrealistic expectations about this material world. But when you're realistic about the material world, you do Kaliyama Shashvatam. You expect the worst and then you don't get traumatized too much. Still. Anyway, the point is, even when these traumatic things happen, and that's part of life, you know, people pass away who you love. For example, we've experienced a lot of that lately, where people who we really loved, like Dr. Chu Maharaj and others, passed away, and it's just very traumatic. So, but we have to continue with our service and be patient and endure through all these circumstances, remain stable and steady. It's a challenge. But if you can do that, tatena kampam sushamikshmana bunjana vatma kritam vibhakam ritvag bapurvi vritanam namaste jiveta yo muktipade siddhaya bhakti. If one can actually tolerate all these things that happen to one and go on serving Krishna with one's body, mind, and words. Actually, the mind is the hardest thing. You can have your body serve Krishna, but your mind won't be there. And your words can serve Krishna, but your mind won't be there. Your consciousness won't be there. So that is the point. Just to continue stable, steady, year after year, in spite of whatever happens, happiness. And sometimes there's overwhelming happiness, and one gets bewildered from overwhelming happiness. So, cha avatarne hapi samuchaye Triti mantahana bhaje pakshi murgachaye. The word cha is for emphasis, and the word api is used to indicate an aggregate, means putting together. Thus it is understood that even dull creatures like birds and illiterates can also be situated in endurance and engage in Krishna's devotional service. That's why we chant the holy name loudly and attractively. When devotees go out and chant, they should chant such an attractive fashion, using instruments that will attract the local populace, not drive the local populace bananas. And in this way, people will be attracted to hearing the holy names. Sometimes I've seen devotees, they go out and they chant the holy names, which are pure, but they're using accompaniment that really doesn't really attract people. So the whole point of accompaniment, we're talking about the instruments used, should be done. You should use whatever instruments are the most attractive to the people you are dealing with. It's not that you're simply stuck with certain instruments, quote, Vedic instruments. Harmonium's not Vedic. It's not that you're certainly stuck with certain instruments of a certain culture. You can use instruments of any culture, but the main thing is the holy name, which is transcendental to all cultural distinctions. And if you chant the holy name purely and use the instruments to attract people, use the dancing to attract people, but the whole point is the holy name, not the instruments. That's secondary or even tertiary. It's the holy name, and whatever you have to decorate the holy name with to attract people, do it. Just do it. So, anyway, so even birds and illiterates can be situated in endurance, can even continue in devotional service. Atma Shabde Buddhi Kahe Buddhi Vishesha Samanya Buddhi Yukta Yata Jiva Avashesha. The word Atma, is used for a particular type of intelligence. Since all living entities generally have some intelligence, more or less, they are included. So everybody has some intelligence. Even the birds, they have intelligence, how to get the worms. Budye Rame Atma Rama Dvita Prakara Pandita Munigana Niranta Murkahara. Everyone has some kind of intelligence, and one who utilizes his intelligence is called an Atmarama. That means he's taking pleasure in the self or the intelligence. There are two types of Atmaramas. One is a learned scholar and philosopher, and the other is an uneducated, illiterate, foolish person. So here we find different descriptions of Atmaramas, one who takes pleasure in the self. But both of those types are attracted to Krishna. Atmaramas Chad and Nigranta Rukrame Kurvanti Hatiki Bhakti Tamuta Gunahari. Krishna Kripya Sadhu Sangha Sange Rati Buddhi Paya Sabachari Shuddha Bhakti Hare Krishna Paya. By the mercy of Krishna and by the association of devotees, one increases his attraction to an intelligence for pure devotional service. Therefore, one gives up everything and engages himself at the lotus feet of Krishna and his pure devotees. So it's, in other words, a gradual process. You give people association, give people the holy name, you give people prasadam, and gradually, it's not that you tell people to give up everything. People become detached, and they gradually give up everything. And another verse from the Bhagavad Gita, first of the Nachalur, Ham Savasha Pralo Matak Sarvam Bhavartri Matwa Bhajanti Bam Buddha Bhavan Samamata. Obviously, I, Krishna, am the original source of everything. Everything emanates from me. The wise perfectly know this, engage in my service of love and devotions. Quotation from Bhagavad Gita. Obviously, it's the first of the nutshell verses, 10:8. Maybe there'll be the next one too, like Machita. Let's see. No, not the next one here. Tevai Vedantyati Taranti Chadeva Mayam Stri Shudrahuna Shabarapi Papa Jivaha Yad Yad Bhuta Krama Parayana Shila Sikshas Tiryajana Pikimu Shruta Dharana Ye. Women, fourth class men, uncivilized hill tribes. That's all of us. Oh my God. Hunters and many others born of low families, as well as birds and beasts, get engaged in the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who acts very wonderfully and follow the path of the devotees and take lessons from them. Although the ocean of nescience is vast, they can still cross over it. What then is the difficulty for those who are advanced in Vedic knowledge? In other words, whatever background one has, one can become a guru. This is a quotation from Srimad Bhagavatam 2.7.46. Lord Brahma said this when speaking to his disciple Narada about the wonderful characteristics of Lord Vishnu. Simply by chanting the glories of Lord Vishnu, one can cross the ocean of nescience, science, even though one may be low-born. In other words, it doesn't matter your background. Once you've taken up Krishna consciousness, in fact, it's considered an offense to consider a Vaishnava or Vaishnavi according to their body. That is an offense against the Vaishnava or Vaishnavi. Vichara kariyat yame bhaje Krishna paya, se buddhi dena tanre yate Krishna paya. Consider all these points. When one engages in the service of Krishna's lotus feet, Krishna gives one the intelligence by which he can gradually progress towards perfection in the service of the Lord. Maybe we'll have another nutshell verse here. Yeah, I knew it was coming. Tesham satadayuktanam bhajatam pratipurvikam dadami puddhiyogamatam yenamam viyantate. I could guess that. And that's again Bhagavad Gita in the 10:10. To those who are constantly devoted to serving me with love, I give them the understanding by which they can come to me. There's a quotation from Bhagavad Gita 10:10. Satsanga Krishna Seva Bhagavata Nama Prachevasa He Pancha Sadhana Pradhana. To be elevated to the platform of devotional service, the following 5 items should be observed: association with devotees, engagement in the service of Lord Krishna, the reading of Srimad Bhagavatam, the chanting of the holy names, and residence at Vrindavan or Mathura. Association with devotees, very important. Avoid other associations insofar as possible. Serve Krishna with your life, especially preaching, bringing people to Krishna consciousness. Don't want to use the word preaching. Hear Srimad Bhagavatam, which is an incarnation of the Lord. Chant Krishna's names and make your home, if you can't reside directly in Vrindavan and Mathura, make your home Vrindavan. In other words, you have pictures of Krishna, you chant the holy names, you offer the food to Krishna, and then your home is as good as Vrindavan. And your mind is absorbed in Vrindavan. E panchamadhyeka svalpa yadihaya subhuddhi janarahaya Krishna premodaya. One's dormant love for Krishna gradually awakens if one is a little advanced in one of these 5 items and is intelligent. Just a little advanced, one of those 5 items. Durur hadbhuta viryesmin shradadure panchake yacha swapo pisam vanda sadhyam bhava janmane. The power of these 5 principles is very wonderful and difficult to understand. Even without faith in them, a person who is offenseless can awaken his dormant love of Krishna simply by being a little connected with them. Wow. Bhagavatam, association of devotees, chanting the holy names, living in a holy place like this. Just a little connected. This verse is found in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 1-238. Udara Mahati Yandra Sarvotama Buddhi Nanakami Bhajye Tabu Paya Bhakti Siddhi. If a person is actually liberal and intelligent, he can advance and become perfect in devotional service even if he has material desires and serves the Lord with some motive. Yes, we've been talking about that before. And another time we hear the same verse, Akama Sarva Kama Va Moksha Kama Daradi Tivrena Bhakti Yogeni Yajeta Purusham Param. Whether one desires everything or nothing, or whether he desires to merge into the existence of the Lord, he is intelligent only if he worships Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, by rendering transcendental loving service. So, let's go over this verse. Akama means without material desires. Sarva kama means all material desires. Moksha kama means wanting to have liberation. Udarade, that means sincere and advanced, one's intelligent. Tivrena means forceful. Let's see how they describe it here. Firm. Same thing. Tivrena bhakti yoga, and one performs bhakti yoga in a very enthusiastic, forceful way. Then yajeta, he will attain the worship Purusham Param, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that's important for us. We shouldn't be embarrassed that we have some desires. Then Krishna won't fulfill a desire if it's going to be harmful to us in devotional service. Just like I desire a nice computer, and I have a nice computer by the mercy of Krishna and Krishna's devotees. So Krishna won't give it unless I was going to use it in service. I was going to use a computer to play video games, which I don't do. I find them quite boring. And Krishna wouldn't let me have them. But because I'm using the computer in Krishna's service, then Krishna lets me have a nice computer. So even though I desire a nice computer. So we engage our desires in Krishna's service. Bhakti prabhava se kama chana danya Krishna pade bhakti karaye gune akarshiya. Devotional service is so strong that when one engages in it, he gradually gives up all material desires and becomes fully attracted to the lotus feet of Krishna. All this is brought about by attraction for the transcendental qualities of the Lord. So, in other words, if we hear about the Lord's transcendental qualities, we become attracted, and that encourages us to engage in devotional service. And the more we engage in devotional service, our attraction increases. And the more attraction increases, the more we engage in devotional service. And that increases the attraction even more, and then the more we engage in devotional service, so it snowballs and we go back to Godhead. Sacham dishat yatitam artito nrinam naivartado yat punar artita yata swayam vidate bhajatam manikshatam ichapitanam nijapada pallavam. Whenever Krishna is requested to fulfill one's desire, he undoubtedly does so. But he does not award anything which, after being enjoyed, will cause one to petition him again and again to fulfill further desires. When one has other desires, but engages in the Lord's service, Krishna forcibly gives one shelter at his lotus feet, where one will forget all other desires. A little bit frightening there. Forcibly gives one shelter at his lotus feet, where one will forget all other desires. Forcibly. Actually, I desire that everybody become Krishna conscious. This verse is from Srimad Bhagavatam 5:19-27. Atma shabde svabhavakahi tataye ramhe Atma rama jiva yata stavara jangame. Another meaning of the word Atma. You see how Lord Chaitanya is deriving different meanings of each and every word in this verse, the Atma Rama verse, of course. And he's let's say, associating them with other words and other definitions and other words. That's called permutations. He's coming up with 61 meanings of this verse. Another meaning of the word Atma is one's characteristic nature. Whoever enjoys his particular type of nature is called Atmarama. Therefore, all living entities, be they moving or non-moving, are also called Atmarama. So everyone's an Atmarama. Because everyone's taking pleasure in the self, or one's nature, or one's spiritual nature, one's material nature, one's mind. Everyone's trying. But actually, we should be taking pleasure in Krishna's service. That's the spiritual Atmarama. Jiveta svabhava Krishna das abhimana dehe atma chakyane acha ititase jana. The original nature of every living entity is to consider himself the eternal servant of Krishna. But under the influence of Maya, he thinks himself to be the body, and thus his original consciousness is covered. So that's interesting. That shows us that we are originally Krishna conscious. Our original consciousness is covered. That's Caitanya Caritamrta. You can't argue with Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. Let me just copy that and send it as a message. Some people don't believe that. So, Cha Shabdeva Api Shabda Samuchaye Atmarameva Hana Shri Krishna Bhajaye. In that case, by the word Cha, the word Eva is meant. The word Api can be taken in the sense of aggregation. Thus the verse would read Atmarama Eva, that is, even all kinds of living beings worship Krishna. So Atmarama can refer to every single conscious or even unconscious entity, and so everybody worships Krishna. And there's another way of taking it: everybody worships Krishna, directly or indirectly. It is mentioned that every living entity is Atmarama. That's why I said temporarily covered by the influence of mind, the living entity serves as senses, which are represented as Kama, Krodha, Lobha, Moha, Mada, and Matsarya. And Prabhupada translates this as our good old friends, lust, anger, greed, illusion, madness, and envy. These are the anarthas. In the material condition, also another one was as fear, vaya. In this material condition, all living entities are engaged in sense grayad. But when they associate with devotees who follow the regulated principles, they become purified and awaken to the original consciousness. They then attempt to satisfy the sense of Lord Krishna and engage in his devotional service. In other words, all we have to do with each and every living entity, whether it's a cat or a dog or a human being that's like a cat or a dog or a gorilla, we just have to give them Krishna in one way that they can digest. Either it's prasadam or the holy name or some song about Krishna, some philosophy, somehow or other. We have to give them Krishna Upadesh, means the association of Krishna. That's our duty as devotees. Hey jiva sanakari savamuni jana nigranta murka nicha stavara pashu gana. Living entities include great personalities like the four Kumaras, and also low-class, foolish people, trees, plants, birds, and beasts. So, where do we fit in there? Vyasa, Shuka, Zanaka, Dira, Prasiddha, Vajana, Nigranta, Stavara, Dira, Shuna, Vivarana. The devotional service of Vyasa, Shuka, and the four Kumaras has already been well celebrated. Now let me explain how immovable living entities like trees and plants engage in the Lord's devotional service. Wow, this is a really interesting explanation, how trees and plants can engage in Krishna consciousness. Of course, you can grow something, or have fruits from the trees, or use the trees to construct something. That's one way, but that's not what's going to be described here. Krishna Kripadi Hetu Haite Sabaro Hudaya Krishna Gana Krishna Hana Tanhare Vashaya. Everyone is eligible to receive Krishna's mercy, including Vyasadeva, the four Kumaras, Shukadeva Goswami, low-born creatures, trees, plants, and beasts. By Krishna's mercy, they are elevated and engage in his service. This is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita 9:32, wherein the Lord says, Mami Parta Vipashvata Yepi Shu Papayonya Shrivashasadashi Prastepi Yanti Paramgati. O son of Pata, those who take shelter in me, though they be of lower birth, women, Vaishyas, merchants, and Shudras, workers, birds, hills, and water, can attain the supreme destination. Everyone is eligible to become Krishna's devotee. One simply has to be trained according to the approved process. It is the work of Krishna's confidential devotees to turn everyone into a Krishna Bhakta. If the confidential devotees do not take up the task of elevating everyone to Krishna consciousness, then who will do it? Those who claim to be devotees but do not engage in Krishna's service to elevate all living entities to Krishna consciousness are to be considered Kanishta Adhikaris, people in the lowest stage of devotional service. In other words, You claim to be a devotee, but you're not trying to engage others in Krishna's service, then according to Prabhupada, you're on the Kanishta platform. That's not my words, that's Prabhupada's words. When one rises to the second platform of devotional service, his business is to propagate Krishna consciousness all over the world. Those who are active in the Krishna conscious movement should not remain in the neophyte stage, but should rise to the platform of preachers. That means they share Krishna consciousness. The second platform of devotional service. Devotional service is so enchanting, and this is a description of Prabhupada, that even the first-class devotees, Uttama Adhikaris, also come down to the second platform to preach and render service to the Lord for the benefit of the whole world. So, an Uttama Adhikari means the topmost person with the topmost rights, basically, in devotional service. That means someone who can simply sit and be absorbed in this internal relationship with Krishna. He can just sit and just like be in ecstasy. Doesn't need anything else. Just sits in one place and it's in ecstasy, just absorbed in Krishna. But preaching, or let's say sharing Krishna consciousness, is so attractive and so relishable that even if someone is on that platform, they come down. This is what Prabhupada said. Devotional service is so enchanting that even first-class devotees also come down to the second platform to preach and render service to the Lord for the benefit of the whole world. So basically, it's the most relishable thing. Just understanding what Prabhupada has said. It's even more relishable than dancing with Krishna, is to help people. I mean, compassion is an integral part of the soul. And that compassion, the expression of compassion for others, gives the highest happiness imaginable. This is what Prabhupada is saying. It's the highest happiness to help others. Danyeya madhyadharani trina virudastvat padasprasho durmalata karajavi murishtaha najjo gurya kagamriga sadaya yavalokar Gopam Turena Ujayorapiyat Sprihashrihi. This land of Vrindavan, Brajabhumi, is glorified today because your lotus feet, that's Krishna of course, have touched her earth and grass, your fingernails have touched her trees and creepers, and your merciful eyes have glanced upon her rivers, her hills, birds, and beasts. The gopis have been embraced by your arms, and even the goddess of fortune desires this. Now all these are glorified. This verse was from the Srimad Bhagavatam 10.15.8. It was spoken by Lord Krishna to Sri Balaram. Balaram, of course, is Krishna's older brother. And Krishna is just glorifying Balaram. Such a beautiful verse. Go ga gopakaranuvanam nayator udara Venusvanai kalabadaistanu vrishchu ritsu sakya ashpandanam gatimatam bulakastarunam niryoga pashakrita lakshana yor vichitram. My dear friend, Krishna and Balaram are passing through the forest leading their cows with their cowherd boyfriends. They both carry ropes, which at the time of milking they bind the rear legs of the cows. When they play on their flutes, all moving living entities are stunned, and moving living entities experience ecstatic jubilation, and non-moving living entities experience ecstatic jubilation by their sweet music. All these things are certainly very wonderful. So in other words, the state of living entities changes. If someone is an unmoving living entity like a tree, then the trees start to move. And if someone is a moving living entity like us, we become stunned if we're on that platform. This is a quotation from Srimad Bhagavatam 10.21.19. As Krishna wandered in the forest with Baladev, and the two of them wonderfully played their flutes, all the gopis became very much attracted. Thus they praised the Lord's activities, describing how he was enthusing all the plants, birds, hills, water, everything. Krishna's flute And the sound of the Maha Mantra can do that. The sound of the Maha Mantra can actually enter into the heart even of a lower class creature. Vanalatasthadava atmani vishnu Pranjayamta hivapushpa paladyaha Pranatabara vitata vitapa madudaraha Premarishta tanavo vabrishu sma. The plants, creepers, and trees were full of fruits and flowers due to ecstatic love of Krishna. Indeed, being so full, they were bowing down. They were inspired by such deep love of Krishna that they were constantly pouring showers of honey. In this way, the gopis saw all the forests of Vrindavan. Wow. It's a verse from the Bhagavatam, 10:35-9. For an explanation, see Madhya Lila 8:276. In other words, Krishna's flute, Krishna's association, it doesn't matter what your background is. There's no prerequisites. You simply have to hear nicely. Another verse from the Bhagavatam, which is actually really famous. Kiratahundra pulinda ukasha abirashumba yamana kashadayaha Yenye chapapa yadu pashraya shrayaha Shudyanti tasmai Prabha Vishnave namaha. This verse was also previously in this chapter. Kiratas, Hunas, Andhras, Pulindas, Pukashas, Abiras, Shumbas, Javanas, and the members of the Kasha races, and even others who are addicted to sinful acts, can be purified by taking shelter of the devotees of the Lord. Due to his being the supreme power, I beg to offer my respectful obeisances unto him. So that means everybody and everything. This is what's being proved here by Lord Chaitanya with these series of quotes from the Vedic literatures. Agaitadardha kariluna chayaye unnavim shatiyartha ahila mili hedui. I've already spoken about 13 meanings of the Atmarama verse. Now there are 6 more. Combined these make 19. The 6 further meanings of the verse are based on the following meanings of the word Atmarama, as I described as different permutations. Atmarama, mental speculators, see verse 165. 2, those engaged in different types of endeavor, verse 168. Those who are patient and sober, verse 174. Those who are intelligent, learned scholars, 187. Those who are intelligent but illiterate and foolish. Yeah, it was intelligent and foolish. Anyway, verse 187, and those who are conscious of their eternal relationship or servitorship to Krishna, verse 201. So in other words, different permutations of each and every word, then you arrive at all the meanings that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is exhibiting before Sanatana Goswami. Unisharta Karilu Ageshunara Atma Shabde Dehakaye Chariyarta Tara. I've already explained 19 different meanings. Now please hear further meanings. The word Atma also refers to the body. And this can be taken in 4 ways. The 4 divisions of the meaning of the word Deha, body, are, we have different bodies. Opadika Brahma Deha, material body considered as Brahman with designations, verse 212. Karma Nishta Yaki Kera, the Karma Deha, the body engaged in the ritualistic ceremonies of the Vedic injunctions, that's verse 214. Tapo Deha, the body engaged in austerities and penances, verse 216. And Sarva Kama Deha, the body engaged for the satisfaction of all kinds of material desires, for verse 218. So, I mean, it really gets confusing here. Deha Rami Deha Bhaje Deho Pari Brahma Satsange Sehakare Krishnera Bhajana. One in the bodily conception worships his own body as Brahman. Doesn't look like Brahman to me. But when he comes, it's inferior Brahman. But when he comes in contact with a devotee, he gives up this mistaken idea and engages himself in the devotional service of Lord Krishna. In other words, you think your body is eternal. In some religions, they actually think that when you come to the day of judgment, then that body will come, the bones shall rise again, and then you'll be reconstituted as whatever you were, at whatever age you were, who God knows what. That's why people bury the bodies. Ooh. Well, another reason that people bury the bodies is to help with those who are alive so they can actually deal with the death or the transference, the spiritual transference of their beloved one. It helps them cope with it. But really, the burial of the body is actually for lower class cultures. Unless, of course, one buries the sannyasi's body because the sannyasi's body is considered spiritualized and the guru's body is considered spiritualized. But really, there's the conception of the body as the self. The body is eternal, somehow or other, your aunts and your uncles and all your relatives are all going to have the same relationship in the spiritual world. That's kind of stupid. And your dog will have the same. He's eternally a dog. I wouldn't do that to my best pet. Udaramapassateya Rishivartmasu Korpadosha Parishara Padatim Hridiyam Arunayo Daharam Tata Udagadhananta Tavadama Shira Padamam Punariya Yat Samitya Na Patanti Kritanta Mukhe. Those who follow the path of great saintly mystic yogis take to the yogic gymnastic process and begin worshipping from the abdomen, talking about the chakras here, where it is said that Brahman is located. Such people are called Sakarakshas, which means that they are situated in the gross bodily conception. There are also followers of the rishi known as Aruna. Following his path, they observe. We read about this before in the same chapter. Some repetition in this chapter. They observe the activities of the arteries. Thus they gradually rise to the heart, where the subtle Brahman Paramatma is situated. That's true. They then worship him. O unlimited Nanda, better than these persons are the mystic yogis who worship you from the top of their heads. And we talked about that before, the Brahma Randras. Beginning with the abdomen and proceeding through the heart, they reach to the top of the head and pass through the Brahma Randra, that hole at the top of the skull. Thus, these yogis attain the perfection platform, do not enter the cycle of birth and death again. So they can transfer themselves. Boom! They pop out of the Brahma Randra and transfer themselves to wherever they want to go. It's a quotation from Srimad Bhagavatam 10:87-18. Anyone wants to learn how to do it, we'll be holding lessons in that tomorrow. So, Deha Rami Karma Nishta Yagikari Jana Satsange Karma Chachi Kariya Bhajana. Those who are in the bodily conception mainly engage in fruitive activity. That means who think they are the bodies. Those who perform yagyas and ritualistic ceremonies are also considered in the same category because they do the ceremonies for something material, however, when such persons come in contact with a pure devotee, they give up their fruitive activity and fully engage in the service of the Lord. So, what's been emphasized here is whoever you are, whatever type of body you have, if you come in contact with Krishna through his pure devotee, then you get that bhakti, and your consciousness changes. Maybe not immediately, but gradually. It works away or eats away at your material desires, whether you went bhukti, mukti, siddhi, whatever. And then eventually, you'll just love Krishna. And it's so wonderful. It's a gradual thing. You don't have to force it down someone's throat. That would be terrible, to force it down someone's throat. Okay, so I think we are going to end right here. So today we did 184 to 214. We are going through this chapter rather quickly. Okay, so we're going to stop sharing and allow you all to ask some questions. Whoops, wrong button. Let me unmute you. Unmute yourselves. Okay, so who has a question? And Mr. Gopal Cohen has a question. You can unmute yourself.
This is semi-basic issue, Gurudev. You had mentioned earlier two things, that there's the world is made of traumatic experiences.
Yes,
And then also, you said that the greatest happiness is to help others.
yes,
So I have two doubts. Number
yeah,
one is that oftentimes you try your best, sometimes to the detriment of your own health, either physically, mentally, or emotionally, to help others. And yet they turn around and either don't accept your help, uh, turn on you, betray you, hurt
yes.
you
Tell me
so
all
many
about
times.
it.
Well, I don't think I have to tell you all about it, Gurdev. I think you know.
But that's but that's the greatest happiness. That's unalloyed love. Whoop!
Could
I think
you
you had a heart
elaborate?
attack. I think you just had a heart attack.
Could you elaborate a little bef- before the heart attack is complete?
Because that really means you love someone. Well, we were actually talking about this morning in Bhagavatam class, where talking about how that if you're doing something because you expect a certain type of reciprocation with someone, then that's like a business exchange. If you were hearing Bhagavatam class, I think I saw you online this morning.
I was, but I'm not so much referring to how they may turn on you directly, but then what you're trying to help them with, they don't accept the help. Like
That's
you
all
try
right
to,
because Krishna's happy with you. You're successful.
but the
The
person
point
didn't
is,
get the help.
no, you're not happy that the person didn't get help, but the point is that you've done your service. Like Krishna says in the Gita, uh, Krishna Consciousness 101, you have a right to your service, but you do not have a right to the result of the activity. So it's not that you're going to be successful at everything you do, materially or externally. Just like Prabhupada did so many things that externally, before he came to America, that were basically failures. But he was successful in the sense that Krishna was pleased. So
But we also see,
you have to gauge your success. That's why it's very important not to see things materially. If you see things materially, then you're going to fail many times. But if you see things spiritually in terms of your service to Krishna, I tried my best, I did my best, uh, then you may be disappointed that you weren't able to help someone, but you won't be discouraged because you will actually understand that Krishna's pleased with you and Krishna's in your heart. He's jumping. I remember going out in Sankirtan distributing Prabhupada's books, and I said be out the whole day, but I could actually feel Krishna jumping around in my heart and being pleased with me, even though I wasn't one of the biggies. Just like nowadays, there's this devotee I just heard. He did like 1,200 Maha Big books in one day.
wow.
Can you imagine? I'd be lucky if I did 12 back to Godheads in one day. No, actually, I did more. When I used to do back to Godheads, I'd do, I think, several hundred sometimes in a day. But certainly not 1,200 paid books. Even even one of the best book distributors in the movement at my time, Mother Tulsi, she didn't do 1,200 big books in one day. She did maybe 200 or 300 in one day, and I thought that was astounding. That's how many cases. Let's say 30 books in a case. You got 10 cases of books or something in one day. Wow, that is amazing.
So so sometimes we see this example like Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, when the sannyasi was dragged away by his wife, he cried and said, I couldn't save him.
Yes, yes, but that crying is an ecstatic emotion. It's
Mm.
not a depression type of thing. You have to understand that sometimes these ecstatic emotions, like separation from Krishna, you have to be careful not to equate them with the feelings that one feels in this world. They're of a completely different quality. There's a symptom of ecstasy. So his crying was a symptom of his compassion. And
So
so
it's
it's
not
not a question. It's not a question of material trauma.
okay.
It's not. See, you're projecting your own experiences or your own understanding of the material world upon the spiritual realm. So his crying, I cried a lot about disciples because no one got dragged away from his sannyas ceremony yet. But I cried a lot. But that crying was ecstatic. When I feel the separation of my dearly departed God brothers, or crying when Prabhupada left. It was, I could say, it was traumatic, but it's not like the traumatic that, let's say a car accident or something like that. Or let's give the example when the police pulled me over for a ticket. I was driving too fast. I was traumatized, but it wasn't an ecstatic experience. I mean, the emotions weren't just like, wow, I finally achieved Baba. Well, Baba, a certain type of Baba, but material Baba. It was traumatic. I was shaking, my heart was skipping beats and everything like that. All the symptoms of Vyabhichari Baba were manifest in my body because of coming in contact, getting a ticket. I was I was extremely nervous. It was just like one of the most traumatic. It was probably the most traumatic experience I had in this lifetime.
Oh my God.
Getting getting pulled over for a ticket. So yeah, I mean, I was actually, oh my God. I did put my EKG device on later on, and the heart really wasn't doing too well.
Gosh.
So I was traumatized, but I can't say it was an ecstatic experience. But when Prabhupada left the planet, it was a spiritual trauma. You can't equate spiritual trauma, or you can, but you shouldn't equate spiritual trauma with material trauma. Spiritual trauma is ecstatic. Just that I could feel myself getting more and more connected to Prabhupada when I was crying after Prabhupada left this world.
Mm.
It was just
So
like
does it go to
connection with some banda. But when I was pulled over by the police, I couldn't feel myself getting more connected to the police.
but does it
Or
go the
more.
other way too? Does the spiritual master feel more connected to the disciple when the disciple is struggling more and not doing as well?
No, wait a second. Then you're
Not
gonna.
not to say not to say that that's what we should do, but I'm saying if the spiritual master is crying because
Well, I mean,
you cried.
Jesus Christ said, which lamb does the shepherd think of most?
Uh-huh. Okay.
That's
So I have a
because
second doubt.
yeah, okay, doubt.
My second doubt is how does one uh, avoid second guessing oneself, knowing that he's actually helping? Like sometimes you want to help someone and you try your best, and then you don't actually help them. They don't actually get the help. How do you know that it wasn't because you did the wrong thing? If you had done something different, it would have helped.
Well, first of all, you have to understand who you help want to help. Oftentimes, devotees they preach at others rather than understanding. So, understand that, like if you're a doctor, you have to understand what disease your patient has before you can help them. And if you give them the wrong medicine, you're going to kill them. So, yeah, actually, I would say the first step is to understand how to help before you help. Fools rush in where devotees fear to tread, as the
So
saying
just
goes.
so a little
So,
caution, a little trepidation is a
yeah,
good thing.
yeah, yeah. Fools rush in where angels fear to tread. I know it's like that, but I added that. Devotees fear to tread.
Thank you, David.
Okay,
That helps.
okay, good question. I think I have to end now since. Oh, okay. Madhava has a question. He gets special
Hare
priority.
Krishna Maharaj, Dandavat Pranam. Sorry to hold you, but in the verse number 190, it talks about several class of people. It says women, fourth class men, uncivilized hill tribes, hunters, and many others, born of low families. Why women are grouped together? How to understand this part of that group, women?
I was hoping you wouldn't ask me that question.
Sorry.
So,
I take it
So
back.
the reason for that is not that women are less, but because of the culture in which that was presented. Let's just talk about the cultural scenario in which these verses were written. Was that the women were at home and were not educated because they were taking care of the children all the time. Not that they were considered less, but because they were not educated due to the cultural dynamics at that time. Because they stayed home and they didn't, just because it was that type of society. That's why there is that apparent bias with women, but it's not really a gender bias, it's about a situational bias. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because you have a particular society. I mean, let's say if you had a society where the men had to stay home and take care of the children and were not educated, just because the society was arranged like that, then instead it would say men. It's not because of the body per se, in the case of women, it's because the particular society in which the Bhagavatam was written or which the Vedic literatures were written, it was basically set up differently than today's society. But women have every bit, everybody's different, of course, but women have every bit of native intelligence as men, and when given education and opportunities, they can be equal in their spiritual understanding and to men. I mean, it's really not a sexist bias. It's just presenting that due to that particular society, because it was a man, that self-realization was a man's business, just because the women were home taking care of the little babies, babitos.
So isn't it the men failed in their duty, which is important duty? They learned spiritual realization. They're very selfish. Why didn't teach to their ladies? They're taking care of babies and still doing all that work.
Because women are better at taking care of babies than men are. You know, if I could never take care of babies, and I don't think you could either, Madhava.
Yes, but only my complaint is why men were so selfish. They didn't even give that knowledge to them. Okay, they
No, but
couldn't
they,
go
but
to
they,
school.
no, they engage them in devotional service. The knowledge is not important, except for those giving guidance have to have the knowledge. It's not that they were selfish. They engaged their wives in devotional service, and the wives achieved the same destination. That's all. And men don't like to take care of babies. I remember. I don't know if I should tell this
Yeah.
story. One time, my father tried to change my diapers when I was a kid, and I did something in his face that he didn't appreciate, and that was the last time.
Yes. Thank you,
But
Maharaj.
mothers have that natural love for the children. Okay, enough. I think I got myself out of trouble that time. Okay, on that
Thank you,
happy
Maharaj.
note,